Let's take action, Game Devs. Tony Chan here, and welcome to episode 67 of Game Dev Loadout, where I chat with the best people in the industry to learn how they got started, the obstacles they face, and the tools they use for success. And now let's chat with today's featured guest, Michael Sweet. Michael, it is game time. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Yes, he is an award-winning composer and sound designer. Currently, he is the associate professor at Berklee College of Music, where he led the development of their video game scoring curriculum. So that's awesome right there. He also received the Best Audio Award at GDC Independent Games Festival and nominations for multiple Game Audio Network Guild Awards. His work includes the Nice Journey project and as well as Waldan, a game. So go ahead, Michael, give us a bit about your personal life and how you got started in the game industry.
So I grew up playing guitar when I was very young. I started, I think when I was in 4th or 5th grade, playing guitar, and I got really into music. And I also was into computers when I was growing up. So I grew up sort of in the 70s and 80s, quite a while ago. And I didn't really think that the kind of two of those things would meet in terms of technology and music. But in the mid 80s, I started composing using, a computer at the time. My first Mac was, back in 1986, and I started composing using, MIDI. And, then I got really interested in that. And eventually I ended up going to Berklee College of Music, to study. And at that time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do in music. I knew that I wanted to, either compose or work as a recording engineer or something. And so I studied, a little bit of composing and some recording and engineering, music engineering and things like that. And then I moved down to New York City, which is where I spent most of my career. So I spent about 20 years in New York, and got involved with games. My first game was back in 1992, and it was a game called Time Warp with the Flintstones and the Jetsons. Mm-hmm. And since then, I've worked on about 120 games. Most of the games that I've worked on have been children's and casual games, but I've done other more serious games and logos and things like that, along the way. And so most of my practical work was done in New York City. And then, I came up here in 2000. I moved up here in 2009, Boston, which is currently where I live. And I've started to, teach what I know about music and sound design to students at Berklee College of Music. So I made that transition about 8 years ago. And, that's a little bit of the overview of my career overall.
Were you a gamer, or how did you transition into the game world?
In the early 90s, when I started doing games, I was a gamer. I did play some games in the 80s, and, in the 70s, I had an Atari 2600. And, so I definitely played lots of games along the way, but I never thought they would merge into kind of a career. Now I have students today that come into my courses at Berklee, and they want to be video game composers, but that career didn't really exist in the early 90s. I was working for a music production company, and a game project sort of came in the door, and I was like, oh, I think I could do that. And the composers I was working with didn't really want to take on that project because it was very tech heavy at that time. And it was going to last, quite a while. The project itself was going to be like 6 months long, 3 to 6 months long. And so it sort of fell in my lap, because of my technical expertise and my creative expertise sort of merged together. And you needed a lot of that in terms of when you were making games, especially in the early 90s, where the tech was a little bit more difficult than it is today. You couldn't, it was at the very beginnings of the internet. So it was really hard to look things up. You actually had to go buy a book if you wanted information and stuff like that. So it was a really nice mix of kind of all the different areas in my life, from entertainment and games to, the tech side, and I could code a little bit, and the music and sound design side. So it was kind of all these different areas sort of came together, and I really enjoyed this convergence between entertainment and technology, and the ability for games to be reactive to a player, unlike linear media like television, movies. the games would actually react to the player. And that was super exciting for me, and I thought it was really cool. And I think it's one of the things that sort of has driven me all along is that convergence.
Yeah, it's insane how crazy the sound has come for video games. Like I think Naughty Dog is like creating a new type of sound system for the PlayStation right now. I think it's called 7.1 or something like that, where it's going to enhance the sound even further. So it's still a growing medium as well.
Absolutely, yeah. 7.1 refers to a speaker setup. So a surround speaker setup. So for instance, basically what it refers to is a left, center, and a right speaker up front. And then it has 2 side speakers and 2 rear speakers. And then the 0.1 stands for, like the subwoofer or the low LFE or the low frequency effect channel. So that's what that stands for. And it's definitely cool. And actually games have been using, surround for quite a while. It really helps if you're playing like, a virtual game that has 3D in it where you're a virtual character in a world and you turn around and you hear things behind you. Surround can really help immerse the player into that experience.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Now, let's break it down, Michael. What do you consider your main area of expertise? Like, break it down for us.
So I guess I would say music and sound design is my expertise, along with technology. This is kind of an interesting question because a lot of my students and other composers I know might have a real heavy specialty in one particular area. For instance, people that write orchestral music tend to excel just in that little area. I, on the other hand, I don't think I excel at any one particular thing. I'm sort of okay or good at a bunch of different things, and that enables me to kind of do what I do. I also feel like I'm not. When someone asks me this question, I'm a little modest when it comes to like, oh, what are you good at? I'm like, I think I'm good at this because people keep asking me to do it. And that is music and sound and as it applies to games and things like that. I think it also is an outgrowth of who your audience is too, right? You as a game developer, or the reason that you got in games and not say movies is because you found your audience in that field. So whereas my wife works in film and television, they're not really my audience. I don't, get along with those people as well as I get along with people in games. In games, I get along with them really well. And I think that helps me connect them, connect me to the teams and connect me to the development cycles and things like that. And I think that, is also kind of a key to success.
Yeah, you have to get along with the people you work with. You have to enjoy it as well, definitely. And now, so you do a lot of video game scoring. What is something we probably don't know about when creating like an amazing video game score that we should know?
Well, for non-composers and non-musicians, I think one of the things that you may not realize as a game developer, how influential the sound can be on the technical level. So I do a lot of coding for my own games too. When I first started out, some of my music would be put in the wrong place, and the composers or the programmers on most projects are super busy, and music is only a small portion of what they do. And so I learned how to do just enough coding to get my music and sound design into the game. So that exploring that interaction, being able to kind of go into a game, move things around, and be able to make my music reactive is something that from the outside may not be apparent to just a game player that comes in and plays the game. But there's a lot of behind the scenes where the music may be reacting to whether the player takes the left path or the right path, or whether in the game itself it's day or night. And there are all sorts of different game parameters that can influence the music in real time. In Waldan, for example, which is a game about Henry David Thoreau, we have a parameter called inspiration. And that parameter goes up and down based on whether you balance your physical needs with your more ephemeral needs to explore the world around you and things like that. And if your inspiration goes up, you actually hear more music layers come in versus if you're working all the time in the game, there's sort of less music layers.
Yeah, the sound, it depending on the sound, it evokes a different kind of feeling. And like you say, games, it can like depending on what the player does, it puts out a different sound. And you make a great point that sound should never be like the last thing on the list, or it should be. It's crucial in games. It's crucial, and you can't keep that last on the list. And what you did was awesome because you you took the initiative to learn programming so you could actually put the game where it needs to be in the game itself. Or put the sound in the game where it needs to be. So that's you took the initiative and did that. That's awesome.
Cool. Yeah, it's definitely one of the fun parts for me is actually seeing how players interact with the game and then hearing my score in new ways. That's the other thing too about games that's unique is that every player is going to play it slightly different, which means that I can't totally predict how my music is going to play back, right? If they choose one path versus another path, the music's going to change based on their choices within the game framework.
Oh, what are common mistakes that you think people usually make, even at a pro level?
Some of these questions are really interesting and challenging in a way. They're really excellent questions, and I think that so this one in particular, I think that people sometimes get super attached to their ideas, and they get so attached to them that it's hard to let go. Like if I write what I think is a really incredible piece of music, and I present it to a game developer and the game developer says, hey, I don't think this is right for our project. As a creative, that can really tear you up a little bit. It's like, I spent all that time writing that music, that cue, I thought was really good for the game. And I think that at any level, if you get too attached sometimes to your creative, that's hard to let go and can really cause friction between you and the team. And I'm not saying that you should, as a creative, should always drop, if someone says, oh, I'm not feeling this track, it's not good for the game, that you should always sort of give up and do whatever they say. But it's really easy to maybe get angry if they're not, if they're not liking a track or feel real disappointment. And I think that's one of the things that even after I've been doing games for over 20, 25 years now, it's a thing that can sometimes hurt in a way. It's like, oh, I put all that creative and it's not working. It's hard for me to let go of it not working in the game. I try and find a way to work. But if I hold it too close to the chest or to the heart, then sometimes you'll get, sad about, not being able to, work as well with the team.
Yeah. It's something you have to realize that it could happen at any time. One of your ideas will be turned down. You just have to realize it might happen and you just got to move on.
Absolutely.
Overall, give us your key principles for creating the best music for games.
I think it's understanding the story is the most important, right? And it's also gets back to that idea of collaboration. That games are collaborative. They're usually teams of people, unless you're making a game by yourself. And there are cool games that are made by just one person. But most of it involves teamwork. In fact, that's probably one of my more favorite things about working in games is the team interaction is, that as a team member, you are supporting other people on the team and vice versa. They're supporting you. It's kind of like you're investing in a project and they're investing back in you and your skills. And so I think that is, of super importance to me when I'm working on a game. So, the better that communication is between me and the team and understanding how the story or the game is supposed to work is so important to me developing a score or sound design that's going to reflect what the story is about and how the player interacts with the game.
Oh yeah, communication with the team to get that idea across of what kind of sound fits with the game. Now, let's take this on a more personal level because, you've been in the game industry for many, many years, so I'm pretty sure you had some bad moments. What was the worst moment of your career? That one moment that's still vivid in your mind? Be very detailed and tell us that personal story.
So you gave me the questions ahead of time, and I got to this question. I was like, you want me to pick one moment? I have many worst moments in my career, right? Because not everything goes your way, and especially when you don't understand a direction. But I'll relate this experience to you that actually it's like the worst experience and the best experience kind of all at the same time, which was kind of interesting. So I was working on a project, and everything in my personal life was kind of falling apart at this one moment. And I really cared about this game that I was working on, but I knew that because my personal life was kind of falling apart at that specific moment, that it was hard for me to juggle my life just in general between my personal life and my work life and I made this call. I made the call to the developer, and I said, look, it was really hard for me, but I was like, I have to leave the project, right? Because my personal life is falling apart, and I don't know how I can manage this, right? And I felt really defeated. And what was awesome was that the game developer said to me, they said, but Michael, there is nobody else. You're the only audio person for this game, and we'll wait. We'll wait until you figure things out. And it was like a really beautiful moment to know that the investments that you make with other people, they invest back in you too, and they believe in you, and that was really cool. So it felt like the worst moment, but was at a real key moment where I felt like I had support from my work side too, and I feel like we all create friendships within the gaming community and with developers that we work with that become important to us. And it's moments like that really say, oh yeah, I made the right career choice. These people, support me for being me, and I may not be, Yoko Shimomura or Jack Wall or one of these, or Austin Wintory, right? Some of these superstar level composers, but I have teams that believe in me and that I'm right for their games. And that was pretty magical.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's why you want to work with a team that's encouraging, that's supporting, that's even like when you had a bad moment, they were there to wait for you and to support you. That's my key takeaway is to invest in great people. What do you want to make sure a game does take away from that experience?
Bounce back, right? That all successful people have sort of ups and downs. And because we are caught in this sort of landscape of social media being present in our lives all the time, on places like Facebook and Twitter, people post only the best sides of themselves, so that it's really easy to be overwhelmed with kind of the success of everybody else, because people don't post their failures. People only post their successes. So kind of, step back a little bit and know that is just kind of propaganda that people are putting out there, and that that if you saw all the intricacies of every successful person that you saw, everyone has these sort of ups and downs, and that it's a part of living. Also balance your life, right? Balancing can be really important between both your, so that you're not, working all the time. Just leading a healthy life also helps in terms of being able to bounce back and go through those tough times.
And that's why I love asking this question, because I want to hear the failure, because I know it's going to happen. I know that we need to prepare for it. We need to know how to deal with it. And that's why I love this question. And thank you for that. Yeah. Bounce back. And of course you got to keep yourself fit and keep yourself going.
Yeah, so I should relate some other things too, because there are things that are totally out of your control too, and they affect sometimes the business economy that you're in. Certainly the recession that happened in sort of the late 2000s, and even when I was in New York, 9/11 certainly hit us really hard, from business perspective, and we had some slowdowns and things like that. There are things in the economy that affect you. A strike, for example, like we just finally resolved the SAG strike, the people that do a lot of the acting for video games. There was a strike with the union with games, and that was just finally resolved. But those things can have impacts on your business, which you can't it's really hard to do anything about those. But being versatile also is super helpful. To have kind of multiple skills that you can apply to multiple genres, is also kind of useful to kind of bring in that work when the work isn't coming in, right?
Yeah.
You may have to go after different markets and things like that.
Yeah, I guess a term or a motto is like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You have to have those different revenues to be
Yeah,
safe.
absolutely.
Let's keep going further. Like, what are bad recommendations do you hear in your profession?
Most of the advice that I hear is coming from a good place. I think this is a another sort of difficult question to answer because it really digs in. It's like, oh, what do people say that, I think that it comes down to this larger sort of issue about being yourself, right? A lot of people want to try and be someone they're not, and it's really sort of easy to see through that. So when people talk about sales and people talk about success and things like that, and talk about how easy it is, a lot of times people look sort of inwards and say, well, I need to be that person to be successful. And how can I be more like that person? And I think that that's kind of a shift that you shouldn't make. I think that it's much better for you to be comfortable with who you are and have an understanding of the things that you're not necessarily going to be good at everything. But you'll still have strengths in the industry. And sometimes it takes time to figure those things out. For instance, when you're, a lot of times when I'm writing a track, I'm in my head, I'm my own worst enemy. My own worst enemy is far worse than any recommendation that has ever been given to me, because the enemy inside my head is going, oh, Michael, you're a terrible writer. This is a terrible piece of music. I can't believe you're writing this. You should be much better at, this constant sort of self-awareness. And I think that being able to turn that self-critic off or turn it down is really important to realize that many of the things that we tell ourselves, we would never ever tell a friend, and to kind of say, all right, well, what would I tell a friend if I was feeling down and stuff like that? So.
Yeah, and the thing about that is like the things we like self-doubt our stuff, it's never as bad as we think it is. Like it's never that bad at all. But we become self-critical, and it's important that we dial that down. It's not as bad as we think things are, and to keep pushing forward.
Yeah.
What are the biggest waste of time do you think people when making games?
Wow, this is so self-doubt. Definitely self-doubt. I mean, in my specific area, people focus too much on it. It's actually the stuff that they don't do that ends up kind of hurting them. I feel like making investment of time is super important, but there are areas in my field that I feel like are kind of wasting. So beating yourself up, total waste of time. But it doesn't mean that you can just throw away, the self-doubt, right? You have to find people that support you. You have to learn how to cook, make people come over to your house so that you can make friends and have support systems in your life, right? Balance out your life because it helps with productivity and things like that. I'm not fond of like being more specific about my industry. I'm not fond of things like templates. I'm not fond of putting up demos to SoundCloud. It's not that they're waste of time necessarily, but I think they're not as useful in terms of maybe getting work or selling yourself as actually just going out and meeting people. That can be a much better way to get onto new game projects and things like that.
Oh, let me ask you this. Is it okay for people to bring their music demo to like a meetup? Or should they just, meet with that person first and be like, hey, I got a demo. Is it okay if I show you sometime? Like, what's a good way for someone that's, new and wants to show off their work? And you say, it's better to meet up with the people. How would they do it going forward? Yeah.
So I think demo derbies, that's kind of what the term is for that, bringing your demo, music or sound design demo to a group and getting them to critique it is a great way to meet people. And you're going to get some good feedback about and generally positive. The great thing about the game community itself is that most people are in game audio are really helpful. And that's not true in film and television, where they're much more cutthroat. But I think that if you brought your demo to a group, that's actually a great idea, and it's a great way to meet the people, the panelists that are giving you feedback, and it's also a great way to find out about your work. And generally, the help that you'll get is directed specifically at your level. So if you bring in a piece and it's not John Williams, or it's not a super high level, they're going to tell you the thing that you need to do to kind of level up as a composer, or level up as a sound designer, and not do a comparison like, oh, this is not Thomas Newman quality. That's not. I like this idea that the game audio community is basically helpful, and we want to help everybody out. And there is plenty of work out there for everybody. I don't want to say plenty of work, but there is work out there if you dig deep enough.
Yeah, there you go, Game Dust. You heard it. See, the game industry, the people are really helpful. You just got to go out there, meet people and ask them, well, what can you do to get in? You just have to go out there and meet people and ask. What have you changed your mind about in the last few years, and why?
I'm going to choose a personal one. If I told myself when in my 20s, I'm in my late 40s now, in my 20s, if I had told myself that exercise would have made me happier as a person, I wouldn't have believed you. But I do know now that exercise is a really excellent way to combat things like depression and balance your life a lot. And cooking would be also one of those things too, where I would have said, no, cooking's not important. But actually, cooking is really a great way to bring people together, and a great way to sort of build a support network. And I think that people don't realize how important that can be when things aren't going so good in your life. And so those are the two things that I think are, I've changed my mind about since I was in my 20s.
Yeah, who doesn't like a get together with food? Everybody loves that stuff right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of exercise do you do, if you don't mind me asking?
So I've tried all kinds of different things. The thing that works for me is to sort of combine meditation and walking. So I do a ton of walking. I build a 2 mile walk into my way to work, and I build a 2 mile walk into my, when I'm leaving work. And so it allows me to sort of decompress. It allows me to sort of plan things and let my mind decompress. So it's not, I used to run, and running's hard because I can't do it every day. If I run every day, I get injured. But I can walk a lot every day, and it keeps me healthy, and it helps me really focus.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You have to find what works for you. And, exercising, it's a hard thing to stay motivated, to keep consistent with it. But I think once you find that one thing that you can stay consistent with, you can keep going. Cause like me, I just walk my dog every day. That's like my exercise. I walk my dog for like 15, 20 minutes every day. And so that's my exercise. So you just gotta find something that works for you. And definitely health is so important.
Yeah, dogs are such a great support mechanism,
Yeah, I love my dog. Yeah. Now that you're more experienced and better, what do you think was like the best investment you've made? Aside from people, is there like another investment that could be of money, time, or energy?
So a lot of people talk about big conferences and going to conferences and things like that. I think that you need to do what suits you. For instance, I'm not a good salesperson. I'm a terrible salesperson. There are people that can sell used tires. They're so good at being and there are composers that are super charismatic. I'm not super charismatic. It'd be awesome if I was super charismatic, that work was just coming in my door, but I think that's not necessarily true. So I invest in things like game jams and things where I can let my work show off myself. So I invest a lot of time in those game jams. And so the first game jam that I did was actually part of the Indie Game Jam. This is back in, 2001, 2002. And it introduced me to a lot of people, but it also helped me network in the way that I need to network, which is not, the quote sort of networking part, but it's the actual, let me do some work and show you how I like to work and the kinds of things that I can do. So, game jams, definitely, a great investment for me.
Oh yeah, and that's yeah, like you said, that's a great way to show your work. Because other conferences, you just go over there and talk to people. You don't necessarily show their work unless you have a booth and everything. But Game Jam is where you create your game, or yeah, create a game and just show people right then and there with other game developers. So yeah, that's a great investment right there. What was the greatest idea you had to date, like an aha moment?
I want to say that every day I have an aha moment. One of the things that people sort of get stuck in holding ideas really close to their chest, almost like they're not going to have like another great idea, right? Uh, and I think that it's important to be really free with your ideas, and because and not to give them away necessarily, but I think that by holding on to them too tightly, then they don't have room to sort of grow and fly away on their own, you know. And so in terms of like, I have this really awesome idea about like, I have this really, like I have a story that I've always wanted to make into a game, but, I've never been able to. So someday I'm hoping that story will be turned into a game. And it's kind of a takeoff on, the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz, and that his sort of backstory, which relates to the reason why he's a Tin Man in the first place, is because he falls in love with the Wicked Witch of the West, like a servant girl, right? And the witch says, "No, you can't have her, and you're upsetting me, so let me cut off your arm," right? So you know, so basically, and then he's mechanical, so he makes an arm, and so eventually the witch takes away all his body parts except for his heart, right? And then his heart is this is like an aha moment, right? It's not an aha moment, but eventually she takes away his heart, and that's why he wants his heart back, so that he can love again, right? And I think there's a really great game to be made out of that somehow. I don't know. I mean, kind of a David Lynch game, but I'm not quite sure. But I think, I have, whether it's a work process or it's a story idea or it's a game idea, I don't value, say, one over the rest of them in any way. I'll relate one game thing, which is I was trying to do for Waldan. Waldan takes place in the forest around Waldan Pond, and I needed to do kind of environmental sound in kind of an interesting way, and without using up too many voices or too much CPU power. So what I did was I put a quad speaker array, like an invisible quad speaker array around the player, so I could play surround sound for the player and match the cardinal directions no matter how he sort of moved.
Interesting.
So it gave a really much better surround ambience than if I just had recorded a generic ambience and played it all the time. This way it can move with you, and it also could, like, you could spin around and hear the sort of individual sources around you. Instead of what I did with the birds was I put kind of a bird speaker in every tree where birds would be. And that provides for this really beautiful sort of spatial environment, in that game. So I guess that's, one of the later ideas I had that pertains to my industry specifically.
Are you going to be the one that create the music for the Tin Man video game?
I don't know. And who knows? I may make it into a film. I have some ideas about that. That's actually been turning into like a small side project that I'm excited about. And who knows what will happen to it, dependent on sort of how much time I have to put into it.
Look forward to it, Micah, if you do make it happen. What are you most excited about today in the game industry?
That it keeps growing. It keeps getting bigger. Virtual reality is an awesome thing. Artificial reality is an awesome thing. There's a huge a lot of people think it's kind of brand new, but I feel like it's almost an extension of games to begin with, because games are about player reaction or computer reaction to a player's choice and things like that. And so I feel like with all this growth, not only on the VR and AR side, but also in terms of us making better and better games, that's always super exciting. And it gives us more and more opportunities. At one point in time, we looked at games as just being for boys in their basement playing, shooters, right? But now we got games on our phones, we got games everywhere, which is, from amusement park rides to all these other, and it's really opened up the genres too. So there's not just hardcore games, but there are casual games and kids games and, simulation based games and all these other areas that keep growing. And I think that's the excitement for me too, is that it's not limited to kind of one type of story. You can tell any type of story, or create any kind of cool game mechanic or puzzle or things like that. And it's fun for people to engage with. It means that from a composer's point of view, I can write lots of different musics. I don't have to just write dark, aleatoric, string, choral music. I can write, New Orleans Cajun music one day, and I can write, a string quartet the next. And that's something that's also really cool.
Yeah, the diversity in games now, it's just amazing. And in terms of AR and VR, what do you think, like how sound is going to take it to like another level? You think like the sound is going to be different when creating for VR and AR?
Some things are really different. So sound design is really different in terms of the way that you have to spatialize for objects. So in games, in regular games that you have on a television, you don't have to be quite as aware of the specificity of where sounds are coming from. But in virtual reality, since you have to have a lot more speakers in the world showing the player where sound is coming from. So you have to, instead of having, 4 speakers in the world, speakers is not really the right term, emitter, right? A sound emitter. Instead of having, 20 sound emitters, that number kind of triples to like 60 sound emitters. So you can be much more detailed when when you pick up an object in the world, the object is going to have to have an emitter attached to it, and any object that interacts with is also going to have an emitter. So it just takes more detail, more work to make it feel realistic or non-realistic, depending on the direction of the game.
Yeah, and that's more work for composers now, because like you say, in VR, players are basically interacting with everything, so there has to be a sound effect for everything to interact with. Yeah. Well, what is the one game that had the most influence on you, and why?
I think so. I'm going to go with Portal 2 for this, because it was so inventive with the sound, and the sound is so interesting. I love the game. I love the story behind the game. It feels really immersed. That changes like every day. So actually it changes every hour, right? If you asked me yesterday, it would have been BioShock Infinite, the DLC Burial at Sea Part 2, right? But if you ask me today, it's Portal 2. It was so inspiring to see Mike Moraski's work on that, as sort of pushing the boundaries of how sound and sound design like music and sound design start to overlap with one another. Limbo is a really great game for that too, which has really excellent music and sound design. And it doesn't really matter what it is. It's like this beautiful sort of, oral world, that is created that just inspires me. So, today I'm going with Portal 2.
Ooh, I'm curious. So is there like what is the sound or music called? Can you remember what's the name of the video game score for Portal 2?
Oh, I think you mean like a genre, like what is it, techno or rock
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a combination of things. It's mostly electronic music, but it has some orchestral bits in it too. So it kind of covers a kind of a range of different things, but mostly electronic. But there are these, like, one of the things that you can do, for instance, is there are these puzzles that you need to solve. And when you solve a puzzle, like each piece of the puzzle causes a new layer of music or sound to be added, so that the player is getting some like extra music experience for like solving these puzzles. And it's really cool. So yeah, and so the primary composer, his name's Mike Moraski. He works up at with the Valve guys. And terrific. He's also done other stuff like Left 4 Dead and other games. He's really excellent at sort of pushing the boundaries of what is music and sound design in games.
Yeah, Portal 2, it's just an amazing game in general as well. The puzzles are so fun, especially doing co-op. Yeah, I absolutely love that game.
Yeah.
Why do you love being part of the video game industry?
Because they accept me. I think that this goes back to finding your audience, right? It's so important to figure out who your audience is as a creative, and it's easy for me to talk to game people. It's easier for me to kind of talk about my favorite games, or because I played them, and and I enjoy them, and I get really satisfaction, and I admire them. And so it's easy for me to sit down with any other game developer and talk about games and be excited. I'm not faking it. I'm not like, I'm generally interested in games. And I think that I feel comfortable here. I'm super geeky and, I can code, which is like so I feel comfortable in games because a lot of people have similar backgrounds to me.
Yeah, I think because I recently went to Austin Game Conference, and I think the best way to know if you really want to be in the game industry is to go to a meetup and talk with fellow game developers. Because like you say, when you get to interact with like-minded people, you feel like you belong there. You just feel like it felt like home. Like when I went to Austin, I just felt like, dang, this is where I need to be. Because I'm in Houston right now, but Austin is where like the game industry is at, and I just feel like I need to be there somehow. And I will find a way there one day.
By the way, so you're in Houston. I didn't know that. Is everything okay with your home and stuff?
Oh yeah. Fortunately, well, my house, it almost got flooded. Like it just barely touched the garage, but luckily we didn't get flooded. But I think one block down, or just one block down, I believe someone's house got flooded. So we were really close to it. Really, really close to it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're safe. That Houston's definitely going through a tough time. Yeah. Well, as Puerto Rico and Florida and like all these. Yeah. So tough year for weather related events.
Yeah, it's been crazy. It's been crazy, but yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, we're doing good. We're coming back, so it's all good. We're coming back strong. It's all good on this side. Yeah. Awesome Game Devs. The show isn't over yet. We're almost done. We have reached a crunch time, the phase that is dreaded, but we are here to overcome it. Basically, Michael, I would ask you quick questions, and you'd be giving us a ton of valuable information in return. Are you ready to crush it and release the show?
Sure.
Yes. What was holding you back from joining the game industry?
I fell into it backwards, so nothing was holding me back specifically. But I think that for new people that are looking to get into it, I think there are a lot of supportive people here. Come meet us, and we'll help you out.
Yes, talk to us. We were here to help. What's a personal habit that contributes to your success?
Balancing my life between things like exercise and eating, and making sure that I don't. If I have tunnel vision and I'm just working all the time, then my life starts to fall apart. I think that balance is something that's incredibly important, and you can't underestimate the power of that.
Ooh, yeah, don't underestimate that. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Time management. If you say you're going to do something in 2 hours, do it in 2 hours. And if it's not going to take 2 hours, don't say it's going to take 6 hours, but be responsible for the things that you say, whether it's time management or whatever. Definitely important.
How has a failure set you up for later success?
Every game that I've ever made, I look at and say, oh, I could have done that a little better, or I could have done that better, or man, I wasn't able to get to that. So I feel like every game I've ever worked on helps me do better on the next game that I work on.
Yeah, because you're always learning something new. Like I just recently, I'm finishing up my first game, and I made so many mistakes, but I'm not like seeing it as a negative where, oh, I'm going to quit. I just see it as a positive where, man, I learned so much stuff. I'm going to make sure I avoid it or do better next time. Like it doesn't hold me back. It makes me better.
Yeah.
What resources should we game devs use to get started today?
There is so much stuff. Like I can't believe how many cool resources there are, whether it's Facebook or whether it's just the internet in general. We are such social creatures now that they're like this podcast, for instance, or game developer groups like IGDA, which is the International Game Developers Association, meetups in whatever area you live in is a great way to sort of get started. So it's kind of all around us, right? Find one person and they'll probably lead you to 6 other things, which is really cool.
Oh yeah, network and build that meaningful relationship. Now, this next question is a bit of a doozy, so take your time if you need to. Imagine you woke up the next morning in a brand new world and you knew no one. You still have all the experience and knowledge you currently have today. Your food and shelter is taken care of and you have a laptop. What would you do step by step on the path to join and become successful in the game industry?
Wow. So if I have my I'd probably do some of the things I've already talked about. I think that, so two parts I think make me a good game industry person. One is I love games, so I play them and I study them and I break them. And I think that's a key for me. That's really important because I want to understand how it works. So I like going into a game and breaking it. Like, oh, the music changed there. Can I undo that music change? Oh, the sound effect changed there. Like, what caused that to happen and how can I change it? So I'm constantly studying what people are doing so I can talk to people about it. So I can say, oh, did you see that cool thing? A lot of people don't show their enthusiasm well. And I find that with students, it's the best way. Like, if you're excited about something, tell someone.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of people sort of hold that stuff in. So groups are incredibly important. Go to local game meetups, meet people that are on your level, right? Go to game jams and they are working on their first game. They don't know what they're doing. That investment can last a lifetime in that friendship right there. Two people that I'm working with today, like literally, within the last week, I've had conversations with them I've been working with for like over 20 years, right? So the investments that you make at any level, and I was a beginner back then and I'm advanced now, but the investments that you make early in your career will last a lifetime and they'll keep bringing you work and you'll be excited to work and you'll become friends with them. And again, those investments come back no matter what level you're on, whether you're just starting out or you're into your career. Invest in other people around you because it's it will ultimately be the most valuable thing that you can do to help your career.
Love that. Start investing in people. Don't wait any longer, game devs. Go get online, find a local community, just find people and talk with them. We have reached the end. Go ahead, Michael, give us a parting piece of guidance in how we can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
So if people have questions for me or want to hear more about the kinds of games I made and stuff, you definitely can reach me via email so I teach at Berklee College of Music and my email is msweet, so Michael Sweet, but no Eichel in there. So msweet at Berklee, and that's spelled Berklee, so different than Berkeley, California. So Berklee.edu. You totally can reach out to me there and I'd be happy to respond and give you additional advice or share links with you because I have a billion links that I can share with people in terms of where to start building your own community.
There you go, Game Devs. Michael just gave you his contact information. Please hit him up. He's willing to help. Michael, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. And for that, we are truly grateful. And we will catch you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Game Devs, for listening, and don't forget that knowledge is only potential, power, execution is the game. Go to GameDevLoadout.com and type in the number 67 in the search bar to find Michael's episode for all the awesome show notes that we just talked about today. Until then, keep on making great games, and I catch you next Monday on the Game Dev Loadout podcast. Peace.